Sup,
Sup,
Matt?
and Kaliah.
Welcome back to the Common Table Reflect and Respond podcast,
Yep.
where we reflect and respond on conversations from Chi Alpha at Loyola and Tulane.
Yeah.
Common Table conversations.
Yeah.
So last week we talked about what is a good life and how do you live one. Now, one thing that surprised me when we started off at both conversations is that people did not say happiness, happiness, happiness. Because usually, if I ask people on the street, like, what do you want out of life? They're going to say, I want to be happy.
Yeah.
I just want to be happy.
Right.
Which didn't really come up that much. But when I did bring the word into the conversation, everybody agreed that they wanted to be happy. And so there was some conversation about happiness.
Right. There was. Which, honestly, I was also surprised. I'm not going to lie. Because the craziest thing is you kind of expect that the way I think society is growing nowadays, where people just want to be happy, and we're constantly thriving for happiness, especially through like the lens of social media. But that wasn't the case. But what did come to mind, like reflecting on the responses of the night, we were talking about how happiness and joy are two different things. And I remember there was even a question that you asked, like, whose life do you kind of look to and envy? And I remember my response was my great grandma.
Yes.
And how, like, just the life that she was able to give and how sacrificial it was to love people. And then there was a follow-up where you were like, do you think her life was happy? And I remember saying no, but there was a joy there.
Okay.
And and I said no because I knew so much struggle that she had went through. She had been a widow like 3 times, and like finances and all these things. But then I started reflecting in the biblical lens and thinking of how there's Psalms 23, where the Lord says, like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me to green pastures. Maybe in the, like, and he keeps going and he says, like, and I will rejoice and be in the court of the Lord for all the days of my life.
Yeah.
I'm like highly paraphrasing that, but definitely look it up. That's written by David. And we think of David as this great leader and strong man, but then we really look at his life throughout the books of like 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, Kings, and even parts of Psalms. He's mourning and crying and grieving so much. He loses children, his friends die, his family overlooks him. He's chased and he's outlawed. He lives in caves for so many parts of his life, but he still rejoices to the Lord. He still cries out to the Lord, and he finds a joy within himself. Honestly, not within himself, just from the Lord bestows on him a certain amount of joy and rejoicing in God's faithfulness and favor. And just thinking about that really kind of puts into perspective, like, happiness is not the goal in life, because you cannot always be happy. Happiness is fleeting.
Right.
It's not permanent, but joy is. I think joy in understanding and looking at one circumstance at the surface level and then being able to go deeper and see what the actual foundation of your life is and what actually is there that truly matters or can stay, produces a different level of joy and understanding in your life, which then allows you to walk in moments of unhappiness, and probably more often than the actual happiness that comes with a different posture, a different strength, which I thought was just really, really insightful.
Cool. And then, but another thing at the Loyola dinner that kept coming up was the idea of growth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was really funny to see how people were saying, like, we want to be happy, but, like, they also were they were saying it without saying it, like they wanted some type of struggle. Because you even brought up the analogy of, like, what if we had this happy pill, kind of like the Matrix or whatever. If you play video games, like the game We Happy Few or whatever, where you're just always happy. And in the end, a lot of people said more often than not, that's not a happy life.
Right. Well, not a good life.
Not a good life, you're right. It is a happy life.
Very happy.
But it's not a good one, which, not gonna lie, was very, very surprised that people, I wasn't gonna say yes. I was gonna say that wasn't a good life, but I was surprised that a lot of people didn't fully go to that. because I think right now, there's a misunderstanding of like, is happiness really good for you all the time?
The people in the room that night were very insistent on growth. Like you have to grow to have a good life. As in growth itself was almost like the goal.
Yeah.
Like I need to grow, I need to grow, I need to grow. Which I thought was interesting because growth implies that we're incomplete.
Right.
That there's something wrong, there's something broken, needs to be fixed, there's ignorance that needs to be corrected, and so we're finite, and so I think that's true. We need to continue. And we actually, the second conversation, we did get a little bit theological about that. Like, what does it mean to be a finite human being? Could you, even in perfect joy, in the best of lives, just continue to aspire to growth? Because we're not the same as God, who has everything, and so there's always, as complete as we are, there's always a little bit of incompleteness.
Right.
Which one question we brought up even is like, are we just permanently broken? Are we insatiable? And I think there is a little bit of insatiability in us, but that comes a lot from brokenness and probably pursuit of wrong ends. Pursue the wrong ends, and so they never satisfy, or they satisfy for a moment, right? You get a really good test grade, and it's like, yay, and then you got the next test coming. Or your girlfriend breaks up with you or whatever. And so you write a country song about it, and you're not happy anymore. Unless the song goes, viral and you make a bunch of money, then you're happy again until like your agent steals all your money.
Right. And are you really happy because you're still heartbroken?
You are still heartbroken. But you find somebody new, but then they leave you, so you write a new song, and now you're Taylor Swift reincarnated, and we're not going to have a good song from her for a long time because apparently she's happy now. But in the second conversation, what was interesting is, and personally I think because of the makeup of the group, they talked a lot about freedom.
Right.
And there's kind of a paralleling between freedom, the capacity to do what you want to do, when you want to do it, and happiness. Like good life is the liberty and the power, or the resources to do what you want. And I thought that was pretty insightful. That would be a great life, but of course we have limited resources. We have limited freedom, and so we can't always do exactly what we want to do. And sometimes what we want to do is bad, which I think leads to building a bigger life, a good life. People talk about habits. There's the idea of the first conversation, growth. So how do you grow? What part of you needs to grow to actually be the kind of person who can enjoy a good life? To be able to put up with the frustrations of life, put up with the limitations of life, put up with, just, the country songs that we have to write in our lives. And so there's something internal that needs to be rewired, if you will, or reoriented, and our desires need to shift. Of course, you don't just wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to desire different things than I desired yesterday. You can't do that. You can't just like reach in, grab your desires, and reorganize them like a Rubik's Cube and move on. It's a long process. And I believe God has to be part of that. Another thing that came up is to really enjoy life, you need to be able to pursue something bigger than yourself. Something out there. Because if it's just here, of course, if you're just looking for praise and goodness from outside, like that becomes problematic. But if it's only from inside, that's also a limited resource. And so what's inside needs to be oriented beyond itself. And that's where you can actually live a good life. Which then, of course, sets you up for all kinds of risks to be disappointed. Unless you're ultimately oriented to someone who will never disappoint, never let you down. Which brings me to the St. Augustine quote, our hearts are restless until they rest in you. He's talking to God. We're made for something beyond ourselves. And so it makes sense that we desire freedom, we desire goodness, we desire beauty, and we desire God, ultimately. We're made to desire happiness. We're made to seek that. And if we seek it well, if we seek it wisely, we're going to find it in God. Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of God and all of his righteousness, and then everything else will be added to you. And we want that. That's the life that we want. So the good life is found in God through Jesus, and it's a lifetime of having our insides, like a Rubik's Cube, rearranged like Jesus. And by the time it's all ended, all the colors are on the right side, and you have a life that you can enjoy and give away to others.
That's a really good analogy.
Just can't. My boys have been playing with Rubik's Cubes. I've never been able to figure them out, but I believe God will figure out my internal Rubik's Cube.
Look how you just tied that. That was pretty good. That was a
Common table, connect, and reflect. We'll see you next week.